Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined by BadgerBlitz.com publisher John McNamara. Good to see you as always, buddy.
Good to see you too, Matt.
So Badgers had a bye week this past week, and I think a lot of ink has been spilled on a lot of different things about the issues that the program has faced sort of in the wake of the slow start to the season, culminating in the very lopsided defeat against Alabama. Obviously, a lot of people have pointed out that the offense is just not making big plays and have, sort of questioned Phil Longo and the scheme and, if it actually can work and can fit. But then Jesse Temple over in The Athletic wrote a really interesting piece about how Mike Tressel's defense hasn't, performed at the same caliber as the defenses from Jim Leonard in the past and over the past 5 years. So I guess my question for you, John, is moving from here through the rest of the season, through the last 9 games of the regular season, which of these two coordinators is under more pressure to perform?
I think it's Phil Longo, and it's probably not even close, in my opinion. Luke Fickell took a pretty big gamble on a philosophy switch, a culture shift, a complete kind of overhaul of what Wisconsin was kind of built on through a number of head coaches. And obviously Gary Anderson tried to get away from it just a little bit, but everything that Wisconsin's kind of known for on that offensive side of the ball, they're shifting away from that in what Phil Longo wants to do. And I think some people will point to, well, Phil Longo traditionally is kind of 50-50 pass run. And obviously the numbers kind of bear that out. He's pretty close to that. But, in terms of what he wants to do with the personnel on the field, it's different from what Wisconsin has had success with. And the offense, I don't know, Matt, it's been underwhelming so far. I think that's fair to say, through one season and 3 games right now, it just hasn't lived up to what people thought it was going to be. So, I think my answer is absolutely Phil Longo. And I think that if the season continues to kind of sputter, that's an easy card for Phil Longo to play at the end of the year to say, that's what's wrong with this team. Let's make a change here. I'm ready to do that. And we're going to move forward. So I'm not saying that, that's going to happen or that's something that I'm planning to happen. But I think that's an easy card, like I said, for Luke Fickell to play at the end and say, I made a mistake on offense. We're going to make this change here. And we're going to get back to what Wisconsin has done well for so many years in the past.
Yeah, I think just to sort of be devil's advocate for Tressel, I think that I think that there is significant pressure already because it was very obvious what the deficiencies on this defense were going to be. And there doesn't really seem to be any, there's going to be soft against the run. And the other issue is that they just don't get home to the quarterback. And so they don't have that havoc rate, which is, I think, an interesting stat, used again, credit to Jesse, who got it from, I think, True Media, in that article. But I think that the fact that, they're like 124th in havoc rate this year, just not causing any disruption, that's a problem. Because if you're going to be soft up the middle and can't disrupt, what can you do well? It's like and they don't seem to quite have the answers for that. And, even when Wisconsin's offense was inconsistent in the latter Christ years, you still had a defense that was consistent and could both, not give up big plays as well as create turnovers, create sacks and negative plays. And so I think that there is, pressure on both of these guys. I would agree with you that Longo is probably under more pressure, especially externally, than Tressel, but it's not to say that Tressel isn't under any.
Right. He's coming after, a guy like Jim Leonard, who his defenses were right up there, top 5 in the country, sometimes the top in the country in, select categories throughout those years. So it's a tough guy to follow. But, as much as you could talk about Wisconsin's tradition on the offensive line and at running back, you could say the same thing recently for that linebacker play. And, the linebackers that are excelling in the NFL right now who had played under Jim Leonard. And look, the guys that they have right now have kind of been non-existent. Guys like John Pius, who they brought into the transfer portal, Leon Lowry, who they brought into the portal, guys who you had penciled in to be contributors this year and to create some havoc, to use that, to use that stat. And I think, Pro Football Focus last week had them at 6 pressures. I mean, that's just not good enough against a team like Alabama. And obviously it's a little bit harder to get home against them, but they have to try to create some things on the defensive side of the ball to speed up the quarterback and disrupt him. It's not just the sacks. It's like you said, man, the havoc or the pressure, however you want to measure it. Wisconsin's not able to do that. And, like you talked about with Mike Tressel, there's been some really good defenses there, and Wisconsin hasn't been up to that level on the defensive side of the ball. But, he comes in with Fickle, the guy that Fickle trusts quite a bit. I think he's safe for a while, but, we'll see. And I guess anything can happen in this age of college football.
Well, let's move on to some potential changes for the USC game to see how this, roster is looking. And there were a couple depth chart changes that came this week. Nothing sort of massive. I think Tucker Ashcraft moving into the official starter role after he was out snapping Riley Milokowski by a good deal already. I think that's just sort of more making official on paper than anything else in terms of how they're being used. But we see Vinny Anthony going to being returned for both punts and kicks. Like I've said way too many times on all of the times I've mentioned Badger football in the multiple platforms I'm on, that I'm a massive Vinny Anthony fan and think he has a huge potential as a returner. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. What else sort of did you notice there, John? And what can that tell us going into USC?
Yeah, not a whole lot like you mentioned. Obviously, the big one was Braden Locke replacing, Tyler Van Dyke and as that starting quarterback. Mabry Matoyer follows him. That was to be expected. Quincy Burrows in for Tyrell Henry as a backup receiver. So other than that, not a whole lot of movement there, and not entirely unexpected. If you were a fan and you thought that you'd see these big depth chart moves because they had a bye week, that typically doesn't happen. Now, that isn't to say that, you won't see something a little bit different on Saturday. I think a lot of fans want to see a little bit more Christian Allegro, a little bit more Tackett Curtis on the inside. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know that I can say either way that it's going to happen, or we're going to continue to kind of see what, Wisconsin has shown through 3 games there. But yeah, I guess overall, I wouldn't read too much into the depth chart. I guarantee you it's not something Luke Fickell is studying and proofreading much throughout the week. It's just kind of something that's put out there. And if it lines up, then it's great. If it doesn't, then, people say, well, the depth chart doesn't matter anyhow. So always probably not something to read too much into.
So what's the biggest source of hope then for Badger fans heading into a road game at USC?
That's a good question. That you had a bye week to prepare for this. I think that helps. That USC is coming off a game against Michigan. I think that helps Wisconsin as well. But look, it's going to be a difficult place to go out and play, to go out on the West Coast and to play a pretty good USC team, a USC team that I expect that is going to be able to score against Wisconsin. Miller Moss has looked good through, the 3 or 4 games that he's played so far for USC. And I think it's going to be tough for Wisconsin to stop him, especially if they are not getting to the quarterback and disrupting him. He's not a dual threat like a Jalen Milroe was, where, Milroe can just beat you even when you're perfect. When the pocket breaks down. So it's a tall task for that Wisconsin team. And on the offensive side of the ball, I expect them to really try to run the football a lot like Michigan did. A lot like Michigan, I think Wisconsin's very limited at the quarterback position right now. So I don't know. I think there's not necessarily a blueprint for how to beat USC, but I think Wisconsin will try to do some of the things that Michigan had success with and see if it works on Saturday out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think it's run the ball, shorten the game,
Yeah.
and just hope that you can get enough disruption somehow, some way to throw Miller Moss off, because he can put the ball pretty much anywhere he wants when he has time. So, I think that just giving him the least amount of opportunities to have the ball in his hands is kind of what needs to happen. And again, would be nice to have a positive turnover differential, something that the Badgers have struggled with for last season and into the 2024 season. Let's flip over to the high school. And you went and saw Cooper Catalano. We talked about this last week. Break, as expected, the state tackling record. What was the atmosphere like? I know you had a nice write up over on BadgerBlitz, but what was it? What was sort of it like to experience what is a pretty notable moment for in the history of Wisconsin high school football?
Yeah, and I guess I'll go back when Cooper was a freshman. I didn't get a chance to see him when he was a freshman, but like I remember when he released his tape and just say these are my freshman highlights. I think he had 100 some tackles as a freshman. So you watch him there, and you're like, oh wow, I mean this kid's a really good football player. Obviously, only a handful of freshmen are able to compete at that level with that type of production, throughout the state's history. And then I think I got a chance to see him as a sophomore, another, kind of 100 tackle season. And then once you get to his junior year and now senior year, that the opportunity to break that mark, which is at 462 going into last Friday, it was a realistic thing that he was going to be able to do. So it was a game that, I wanted to go out to see Germantown. I wanted to do it when I thought he was going to have a chance to break it. So that worked out well. He only needed 4 tackles going in, and I was sitting next to Jay Kokorowski, and it was the second half, and it was towards the end of the third quarter. And I was like, man, I hope he gets there. And, we were just kind of laughing about it because I don't think, Cooper's probably hasn't had a game in his whole career, going back to he was in second grade when he's had less than 10 tackles a game, I bet. So he ended up breaking it. Another thing about that was we didn't know exactly when he broke it because the tackle that they credited him for, or at least the PA guy went on for, I looked at Jake, I said, I don't know if Cooper was in on that tackle. And then I think his dad maybe, or someone relayed to everyone else that he had broken it. I was like, I don't know if he broke it just now, but he safely broke it a little bit later in the game. So it was a cool moment to be there and experience. There wasn't this, oh, he did it on this play moment though. So a little anticlimactic there, but getting a chance to talk to him at the end of the game. Cooper's a kid that I've got to know. Throughout the last 4 years, obviously through his recruitment with Wisconsin, getting a chance to talk to him a lot. Super nice kid, great family. Got to talk to his dad a few times. So it's just those are the type of things that they're just fun to be a part of. And he talked about his teammates and getting the win as opposed to breaking the record and stuff like that. So I think that just kind of speaks to his character, the type of person that he is. But overall, just an excellent career so far at Germantown. I know that they have high expectations this year. And, I think Cooper's going to drive that number up into the 500s. And it's probably going to be a mark that's going to be really, really difficult to break, for any future high school players in the state of Wisconsin that are eyeballing some of those stats.
And so how does that sort of achievement in his career stack up against some of the other great players in the history of Wisconsin high school football?
Yeah, that's a good question because, with Cooper breaking the record, you get a chance to look back at a lot of the records or all the records, going through the record books there. And a lot of times, it's not the high profile guys or the guys who wound up playing Power 4, Power 5 football. Specifically with Cooper, 2 guys held the mark, and none of those 2. There's guys I went and looked up and wanted to see what that they did, but they weren't some Power 5 Division I players. They were just guys that had excellent high school careers. And I think if you look at up and down those record books, there's a lot of those guys who have went on to maybe play Division III football or Division II football. So it's not a record book loaded with Melvin Gordon, J.J. Watt, and just some of the top athletes that have come out of the state. It's more of those 4-year guys. Some of these career marks that have just had excellent careers and maybe haven't been talked about as much as others because of the recruiting focus on it. And if you're a high level recruit, obviously you're getting more of the attention on sites like ours and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how he fits at the next level. I think he's a guy who could be, definitely a core special teams player pretty early just because he's a very mature football player and he, clearly knows like where to go, what to do on every down and every snap of the ball. So I think if he's going to see, the field early, that would not surprise me if he was, like I said, like a core special teamer. But speaking of which, where are you going this weekend for high school football and what else are you keeping your eye on?
Yeah. So Right now, the plan is to see Tyler Heinley. He is a kid from Grafton, a linebacker, 2026 kid. So he's been in Wisconsin a handful of times. Was there this past fall, camp with the Badgers, and then he visited for one of the home games already this fall. Doesn't have an offer from Wisconsin, but very much in that conversation for the coaching staff, a guy that staff is keeping a pretty close eye on. Wisconsin likes him on the inside, so a guy that Mike Tressel's looking at. He was a guy I was told that Wisconsin's going to be watching every snap. So I'd like to get out to see him live and just kind of see him move around and at that inside linebacker position for Grafton. So he's on my list right now. Obviously, everything can kind of subject to change if anything kind of pops up late. But that's kind of who I have on my radar right now. Torn Petaway's another kid now that he's up and running. He's healthy again. It looks like that. I'll try to get out to see. And so there's a lot of in-state kids that are out there available to see and hoping to kind of finish the season with a handful of kids that Wisconsin's taken, either a long look at or they're, already committed. In terms of just some, overall impressions through what I think we're through almost 5 weeks now. Classic 8 is really strong. I mean, really, really strong. Arrowhead's up there. Oconomowoc up there. McGuanago, Muskego. I mean, there are a lot of teams, and that's a tough conference to battle through. And I think you've seen that. Last week Arrowhead won a close game against Muskego. There's just some really good teams there. It's going to be interesting to see how those teams kind of filter out into that Division I field, where you have a Franklin and then a Verona, which is a very good team. They're undefeated right now, so it'll be interesting to see how those things kind of filter out. Like I said, through that Division I field, and there's a number of schools I think you can make a case for that could make it to Camp Randall in a couple weeks here.
Yeah, the matchup between Arrowhead and Oconomowoc this weekend is going to be a really big one for sure. So that'll be one of many to keep your eye on this weekend. No matter where it is, though, we will have your coverage over at BadgerBlitz.com. Make sure you are subscribing here on the YouTube page, subscribing to BadgerBlitz.com for the best message boards, best content, best info anywhere in the Badger universe. So until next time, he's John McNamara and I'm Matt Perkins, and we will see you in the den.